podcast series sponsored by Viva, where we focus in on our user community by showcasing some tips and tricks, some cool features, and just general discussions about our technology. Again, I'm your host, Edward Thomponeff, and with me is my co host, Mary Alice. And today is really going to be interesting as we have a theme this month around cybersecurity, which is celebrated internationally every October. And with those topics come some new guests. We only not have one, but two of the most respected voices in our field joining us today, Abe Nettle and Michael Brost. These two bring a wealth of experience, insight, and innovation to the table, and we're thrilled to have them here today. But before we dive into some of these exciting topics that we're going to get in the head, let's get a moment to get them to know them a little bit better. Abe and Mike, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience today on the call?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. My name is Abe, and I am an R&D director with Aviva. I have been with Aviva for 28 years, and as an research and development director, I'm responsible for both the release, development and release of Aviva Edge, and the oversight of cybersecurity posture across the HMI product line. That includes system platform, InTouch, Aviva Edge, Plant SCADA, Enterprise SCADA, among others. Within this oversight, I'm also responsible for the adoption and implementation of the European Union Cyber Resilience Act.
My name is Mike Brost. I've been with Aviva since 1996, and I'm currently in the role of the lead solution architect for the monitoring control division of Aviva for the Americas. Educational background is chemical engineering. Been involved in designing and securing industrial control systems for many, many years, and I'm really focusing on the application side of cybersecurity. How do we design our applications to be cybersecure?
Awesome. It's really great to have you both on the podcast today. And I'm also excited to dive deeper into this topic of cybersecurity because I know it's something that's really important within all of our roles and, especially when, offering our solutions to customers. And Abe, I'm curious from the R&D perspective, could you talk a little bit about how you guys approach cybersecurity during the development of Aviva products?
Sure, Mary Alice, thank you. Cybersecurity is very important for Aviva, and security is embedded in our software development process, from requirements to design, implementation, verification, defect management, patch management, and product end of life. Our secure software development process is certified. It conforms to both IEC 62443 and ISO 27001.
Awesome. And Mike, I mean, just from a perspective from the consulting side of the world, I mean, you're presenting yourself as sort of that de facto cybersecurity expert. And since a lot of our listeners today could be potentially system integrators or partners, can you speak a little bit about, what we should be doing or what should we think about in terms of implementing or architecting a secure system?
That's great, Ed. One of the things that you need to take a look at from a systems integrator's perspective is know what you have influence over and know what you don't. So in a lot of cases, you are operating beneath the established intrusion protection. And you don't much have choices in what version of antivirus or firewall, setups and things like that. But so as you look at designing a SCADA system, the first thing you should be looking at is putting an umbrella of certificate-based protection and encryption on top of that SCADA system. You should have certificate-based comms going between all nodes, and nothing should be able to talk to your SCADA system that doesn't have a certificate given by your, and then managing those certificates is where the real problem comes in. Right? You've got to have a strategy for how to manage them, because certificates do one thing, and one thing that's common is they all expire. And so we got to be able to deal with expiring certificates and replace them when necessary and keep them up to date.
Okay. And I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper into some of those more technical topics, just maybe within our product base as well. I mean, I think with a lot of our system integrators or partners on the call today, they're often tasked with securing a lot of the legacy control systems here. Uh, In your mind, as a consultant, what kind of practical steps can we sort of implement or take sort of a defensible security model that goes beyond things of the traditional sense, like firewalls or basically antivirus softwares? I mean, is there anything inherently in our applications that can sort of help with the defensible security model?
Well, the first thing that you want to really do is eliminate multiple points of access into the device network. The device network is really the most vulnerable part of your SCADA system. Many of these devices simply take a properly formatted message and they're happily do whatever that message tells them to do. So we have to be able to control and restrict what's allowed to talk to that communications gateway, because most communications gateway support like multiple generic protocols, such as OPC, or in our case we have SweetLink, and even though SweetLink is an Aviva protocol, it's in no way proprietary, right? And everybody can know it, and then you can have really open ones like Modbus or things like that. And so you got to be able to design your system so that you absolutely know who's allowed and who's not allowed to communicate to that device network. And in reality, all communication should be done with a service account. No interactive login from any user interface should be able to communicate to your device network during normal operations. On top of that, we need to be able to differentiate who's allowed to do what, right? So being able to say, oh, you have a authentication on connection, right, is no longer good enough, because everybody needs to connect for some reason. Everybody needs to issue commands to the device network for some legitimate reason in their job function. I mean, you may be able to change the bottling line from grape soda to cherry soda, but that doesn't mean you get to adjust the high pressure alarm limit on the ammonia storage tank, or you get to shut off the ventilation fans to keep the operators healthy, or doing anything. So things in this control system are not homogeneous. And many cases in the industrial world, we've treated them as such, so that when you get rights to write to one thing, you actually have rights to write to anything. And now we're relying on obscurity as a security policy, and that's just a failed policy. You can't rely on that. And so most importantly is your SCADA system must be able to differentiate, regardless of user interface or API or protocol, who's allowed to do what.
Thanks, Mike. And I know you mentioned certificates and certificate management. I know we can do things like certificate-based authentication and have verified rights within our solution. So can you talk a little bit about what that means, and then how integrators can leverage these components as part of their projects?
Sure, Mary Alice. So, one of the things that Aviva offers is a service called the SMS service, and it really should be called the CMS service, or Certificate Management Service. And what that is that's a single entity within your SCADA environment that distributes, updates, and maintains that certificate level communication. So when those certificates are about to expire, they get automatically refreshed and kept current with the system. And also, no one can join into the SCADA network that didn't get a certificate. And so that's a highly privileged activity, and normal users should not be allowed to access that. And then that no external software that can be inserted beneath your intrusion protection by someone, either deliberately or accidentally, can worm its way into the SCADA system and start issuing commands or changing data or doing anything of that nature, because they didn't get a certificate, and no one's talking to anybody without having that certificate. And certificates is not exclusive to Aviva, right? Certificates are used by lots of different things, but the management of certificates is where it becomes problematic, right? So the certificates that the SMS generates are standard, normal Windows-based certificates in the secure certificate store of Windows. So you can use those certificates actually to secure and manage the communications to non-Aviva-based products. But the certificate management system of Aviva will just keep those certificates up to date. And that's a very important thing, because typically your certificate's going to expire at the worst opportune time when everybody's on vacation and it's 3 a.m. in the morning and all of a sudden nothing works.
And that's a very specific example, Mike. Does that happen to you before? Just out of curiosity, but
Never,
you
Ed,
know,
never. That's just a completely random example. Okay.
oh, awesome. And one of the things I kind of think about, these conversations that we're happening right now. I mean, IT security is obviously very important to our audience and our customers and people dealing with these type of systems. The same thing as operational security is just as important. I mean, I kind of want to throw some examples in terms of just applications or just type of things that what can we do to solve this. For example, I think the common case that I typically see is how to traverse through different DMZ zones to get to an endpoint, maybe like a cloud system. And oftentimes I find that maybe some of the practices that people promote out there are probably not the safest behaviors, or things of the nature of basically controlling the actual field devices down below, maybe PLCs or DCS systems. Can you kind of comment towards sort of your understanding about how we can sort of address those sort of challenges out there?
Great, Ed. Yes. So, I mean, I'll just say, very rarely do I ever come across an IT network environment that's connected to a single firewall, and the other side of that firewall is the wild
Yep.
and woolly internet, right? In fact, if you're like following NERC CIP guidelines or any of these things, right, they absolutely recommend that you go through a firewall and do a DMZ, and then out of the DMZ, even through a different vendor's firewall, into the IT environment, and you have domain isolation between the IT and the OT networks, so that the OT network is running in a completely different set of users and credentials than the IT network is. And so now you have to have a mechanism. So how can I, do cloud-based activities from an OT network that is not connected to the cloud,
Yep.
right? And this is the reality that we face. So at Aviva, we've developed we call it DMZ Secure Link. It's a cloud whitelisted forwarding proxy that's encrypted and will receive a transmission out of the OT network, reroute that transmission to another IP endpoint and port through the next level firewall. And you can daisy chain these guys together as many levels as you want. I've got customers who've got 6 firewalls between the OT network and the cloud. But he can weave through that maze of intrusion protection without compromising any aspect of that intrusion protection. So the worst thing you want is for the cloud to be taught the ability to reach in and grab data out of your OT network. It's like teaching your phone how to do something on your OT network and bypass and get through all your intrusion protection. And then you leave your phone in some bar or restaurant or somewhere, your kids are playing with it, whatever, right? This is just not a good security practice.
Yeah.
So at Aviva, we basically say, as NERC CIP states, you can only originate communications from the OT environment into the lesser secure, which is what's perceived as the IT network and the business systems or even the cloud. And so sending that data up, one, should only be able to be originated by the OT network. Secondly, is the real risk of sending data into the cloud is not the cloud itself. I mean, but we store all kinds of sensitive information in the cloud. Our money is there, our finances are there, right? Everything's up there, right? Our credit cards, all these things are stored up there. So the real risk is that someone changes that data before it gets there, or can impersonate the sending entity on the OT network and send bogus information. So now you're making decisions on data that's completely false. So at Aviva, first of all, that endpoint of transmission to the cloud is certificate-based, and so it's locked to a given certificate. You can't change it. You can't rename the node and make it something different. And then secondly, we break that data payload into multiple paths. So we take two data payloads. One is a metadata payload, and the other one is a data value payload. The metadata payload describes everything about what it is you're trying to send. It's attached to a GUID. A GUID is called a global unique identifier. It's an identifier that once generated can never be repeated. So no one can ever generate that GUID again, right? And then the data is attached to that GUID. But when we even take it a step further, we take that data and we reduce it to a number between 0 and 1, because all the scaling information of what those numbers mean is in the metadata payload. We send that separately, and both those payloads are encrypted with the highest level of encryption possible. And so no one's going to be able to change that data, intercept that value, and even if they could, all they'd get is nonsense, because every number would look exactly the same. It's just a number between 0 and 1. And there's no way they know what they're looking at. And so this secures that the data that you transmit up into a cloud environment can't be modified, can't be changed, can't be edited by anybody, and is safe and secure for you to do so. So the other thing is that a lot of SIs are being asked to provide MFA authentication, multi-factor authentication. And many times that's being done by Entra ID, which is a cloud with Microsoft Azure AD is now called Entra ID. And that's a cloud-based service. You get a number on your phone, authenticator on your phone, you say, here, validate that you're you. Well, you got to have connectivity to the cloud, right? So our DMZ Secure Link actually will route that to, that's a known endpoint. So we whitelist, list that to a known endpoint to allow that to happen. So now I can do MFA authentication from a network in the OT layer that has no connectivity to the internet. If I opened up anything, it would just say, no, I can't talk to that. I can't get to Google, I can't get to Yahoo, I can't get to any of these global internet services, but I can do an MFA authentication. And this really provides a tremendous level of security for the OT environment.
Yeah, I didn't know that we had those capabilities. That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. I kind of want to transition a little bit because, Abe, during your introduction, you mentioned the Cybersecurity Resiliency Act, and I kind of want to go back to that topic. And I know it's going to be a big deal, especially for Europe. And since you're very familiar with this CRA, can you give us a little bit of overview of what it's all about and how it's going to affect our partners?
Of course, Mary Alice. But before I start talking about the CRA, right, let's remember that the Cyber Resilience Act in the European Union is a regulation. So that is a law that has been passed. And here we're just getting together over a cup of tea or coffee to chat about it. We're not giving any legal advice, neither myself or Aviva. We're just talking about what it is, right? So, Cyber Resilience Act is a European Union regulation for improving cybersecurity and cyber resilience of products with digital elements in the European Union. It makes cybersecurity a legal obligation for digital products sold in European Union. And there are substantial financial penalties if those legal obligations are not met. So it's a game changer, right? Now cyber is mandated legally, and there are financial consequences attached to it. So as we keep talking about CRA during this chat, keep this in mind that now it's a legal obligation with financial consequences. And it's a huge shift, right? We're shifting from reactive to a proactive approach to cybersecurity. I'm sorry, folks, one sec. Um, and and it will make our software more transparent to suppliers. It will require us, manufacturers and suppliers, to be more transparent about our cybersecurity posture.
It,
It's a fundamental change. Just one second. It's a fundamental change because now security becomes a market entry barrier, right? It's not a matter of course anymore. It is a matter of course now instead of a competitive advantage. You will not be able to sell in Europe if you have not met those requirements.
this
Back to
this
you,
is
Edward.
yeah. It's, I mean, Abe, this is huge. It seems like a big impact eh, to the whole entire industry from the industrial software landscape, and I kind of want to you know, I want to deep dive into some of the topics that you have in there, and I want to understand what are some of the changes that this is going to introduce that is different from what today's regulations are going to be. I mean, we have so many things out there today that we probably need to follow, and basically build our systems against. Mike
Hmm.
talked about Nick SERP and all that, but what do we do out of Viva? What's new from Viva? How do we accomplish this? I mean, there's probably a million questions out there. I kind of want to
Yeah.
get your assessment of this.
Yeah. So if you look at CRA, right, it distills into 5 pillars. So manufacturers must fulfill a list of cyber security requirements, and we need to show compliance with CRA, right? That is, we're going to need to go through a conformity assessment. Second, manufacturers must proactively assess the cyber risk of the products of digital elements, right? During construction, right? When we're developing the software, putting it in the marketplace, and through its life cycle. So we'll need to continue. It is an ongoing assessment, which is a change. Many people make an assessment when you put in the marketplace, and then you leave it as is. Manufacturers must provide free security updates. Security updates cannot be charged for per the regulation. Manufacturers must report any active incident. So now, if you know that there is a vulnerability in your product and it's being actively exploited, you need to report to the European Cyber Authority. You know, in Europe, it's called ENISA. It's similar to the CISA in the United States. And finally, technical documentation. Both on the product side, conformity assessment, and there is an additional piece that made into the legislation, which is called the Software Bill of Materials. And that will definitely help our customers to have more transparency and understand what is in that software that they're installing in their plants. In short, 5 core obligations: compliance to security requirements, cyber risk assessment, free security update, incident reporting, and documentation.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Abe. So, one thing that I've seen kind of emphasized as part of the CRA is this concept called secure by design. Could you explain what that means and then maybe talk a little bit too about how integrators can prove that their solutions meet that secure by design concept?
Okay, so there are two pieces here. There is the secure by design of the software foundation, right? The platform that we're providing. And secure by design means your software development process is taking into account security every step of the way, right? You've identified that you have authentication, authorization requirements. Well, then you enforce those in runtime, right? Like all the good stuff that Mike was talking about. Those are features in the product that are built in by design, and there is an intentionality behind it to be secure. There is also ensuring that the source code, right? We talked about features, but then you want to make sure that your source code is implemented in such a way that an attacker cannot exploit that software, right? So for example, if you have a memory leak and the system crashes, can they do an attack, right? So that's from implementation point of view. Then there is verification and validation. We do penetration testing. We have security experts go and test our software using uh, defined, well-defined approaches to see if a software is vulnerable or not. So that's how we do secure software in our software development process. So through the IEC 62443-4-1, right, part 4.1, our customers know that our software is built with security in. Now, when the SI is implementing their their implementation in the plant, right, they need to take into account the needs of that unique control system. And then they can use all the features that Mike talked about and ensure their software and their implementation is secure. I think that summarizes it.
It, one thing that's kind of in the back of my head, right, is with integrators or even with our clients. I mean, a lot of them are running a lot of legacy systems, like maybe version 9.5 of InTouch or older version system platform out there. I kind of want to understand from your assessment there, Abe, what's the biggest compliance gaps that we typically see, and sort of how do we effectively close them out, or
Okay.
is it basically a one and done story, or is there what's the process around this? And
Yeah. So like I said, right, there is this change to being and security risk assessment, right, being an ongoing process. Um, things have the world has changed, right, in the last 20 years, and the practices that worked for our legacy systems do not meet the requirements of our clients today. So if we start looking at how do we close that gap, short term, we have excellent practices there, right? You can do a risk assessment, you
Hmm.
can put in compensating controls, network segmentation, firewalls, intrusion detection system, access control, right? All those are great practices that give a protection that we need. But when you start looking at the medium term, now you need to start engaging with your vendors, right? And start understanding uh, what is their approach to those legacy systems? Have they extended the support? Are they providing security updates, right? And now you need to start thinking about how you're going to continue maintain your software in this new environment
Hmm.
that CRA is creating, right? Because what CRA is doing is it creates a legal obligation. I am not able to sell a software that does not have the CE marking in Europe anymore, comes December 27. So we really need to start in the medium term, understand this CRA requirements, the risk assessment, and see how we're going to move forward. Because you will need a plan in the long term to replace your legacy systems that are not compliant with CRA in Europe, because you're not going to have access to that software, right?
So maybe just on that topic there, more of a pointed question that's probably in my mind right now. Do clients need when this regulation does come up, do they need to upgrade right now?
Like, no, not like I said, right? It's a three-phase approach.
Yeah.
I think right now, you know, Aviva customers should be developing their compliance to this plan.
Yeah.
And we have been receiving inquiries from our security-minded customers already. What is your plan for CRA, right?
Mhm.
So I strongly encourage anyone listening to this to go learn about it and understand the implication to you as an asset operator or to you as a system integrator.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And remember, it will come a point where that legacy software will not be available for sale in Europe anymore. And
Mm,
that is going to be huge.
yeah. Speaking a little bit on compliance, and you mentioned some certifications like the ISO, IEC, SOC 2. What does that mean for someone working within the OT side of things, and how can they actually prove that their systems are compliant, especially in regards to the CRA?
Okay. So just a brief introduction here, right? What is IEC 62443? It is a series of international standards, right? Developed by the International Electrotechnical Commission, and it focuses on cybersecurity of industrial automation and control systems. Like I said, it's a series, it has multiple parts. Some parts are focused on operators, some parts are focused on system integrators, some parts are focused on control system suppliers, and those that build software for those systems. So for Aviva, we are IEC 62443 Part 4-1 certified, which means our software development process lifecycle meets the requirements for control systems within this standard. ISO 27001 is the International Standards Organization standard that is globally recognized for information security management systems. And it provides a framework for organizations to protect their sensitive information, right? Now, you also ask what it happens in light of the CRA. So if we look at that, those certifications are a great foundation. It really says that either your vendor or your systems are meeting those stringent requirements. But CRA goes above and beyond that, right? And those certifications are voluntary. CRA is mandatory. For you to sell in European market now, you must be have gone through this conformity assessment that is defined by this regulation. So security is not a matter of business anymore. It's a market entry barrier, right? It's not a competitive advantage. You just cannot sell in Europe if you don't have a strong cybersecurity posture.
So I kind of want to go through maybe the life cycle of the CRA compliance, and kind of understand from these different sort of key workflows as part of the compliance or implementation of this process. I think we had to go through things like auditing, patching, and maybe potentially a whole entire lifecycle management. I mean, are these necessary to maintain as an ongoing feature, or how does this all work? I guess.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting, right? CRA doesn't introduce anything new. It really collects all the industry best practices and make it mandatory, right? So we've been doing cyber risk assessment. We have been doing patching. All these things are common practices. But now there is an expectation that manufacturers are proactive and deliver those in um, a structured manner, right? In a way that conforms to a set of expectations. Up to now, it was, companies like Aviva that are security minded would already practice that. Whereas other vendors that do not prioritize security might deliver software that is vulnerable, that can be hacked, can be attacked. So CRA, like I said, right, the intention is to improve the cyber security and cyber resilience of products in Europe. And of course, right, everybody sells in Europe. America sells in Europe, Asia sells in Europe. So it really has a global impact here.
Awesome. I know we talked a little bit with Mike earlier, and he shared some thoughts around, the importance of securing the OT side along with the IT side. And so, thinking about this in regards to these new regulations, how can the IT and the OT teams work together for to be ready for these new regulations?
Okay, sure. There are two aspects, right? There is business to consumer, B2C, or business to business, right? B2B. And if we start thinking where Aviva operates, right, we are in the B2B environment. And like you said, IT and OT have to work together to achieve their security goals, right? Security is not an option anymore for the asset operators. So what I see, there are two fundamental aspects that are coming in terms of the CRA. The first one is the software bill of materials. So through the software bill of materials, IT has a clear understanding of what components are involved in the software and protections that they need to have for that. It will help the risk assessment. Um, the other piece is the CRA requires stronger security documentation, right? Aviva already provides a pretty robust set of documentation. And now, with this refined documentation that you're going to see, it will become a lot easier for OT teams to communicate with IT teams and present what are the needs of a control system, right? Given the security needs. what are the ports, what are the certificates, and so on and so forth. That's where those guys will be collaborating, right?
So I want to go back to your initial conversation. So in order for us to do business, or any company to do business within the European market, regardless of where you're at in the world, you need to comply to the CRA standards. But a question I would have in my mind is, do you believe that this will set precedence in all the other different regions that basically have a similar global standard, or maybe adopt the practices that CRA has created? Um, is there any thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's a very nuanced question, right? Will the CRA harmonize the standards that are being produced in Europe become a global standard?
Yeah.
Yeah, this remains to be seen, right? Historically, many European standards have been adopted globally. We just spoke about ISO, right? ISO is an European organization, and many of those are global standards. Um, on the other hand, what we're seeing is many countries are starting to craft their own cybersecurity and cyber resilience regulations.
Hmm.
One example that comes to mind is the Japan Cyberstar, JC Star. Another one in the US that is not quite a regulation yet is the US Cyber Trust Mark. So the different regions are taking a deeper look into what it means to be more cyber secure, more cyber resilient. Um, and I believe that, the CRA, because it's such a game changer, it will have a significant and lasting impact in the way digital products are designed, developed, and sold around the world. I think we're seeing the beginning of a new operating model.
Hmm.
Hmm.
But how it's going to shape up remains to be seen.
Okay. And I know this is a regulation that's very quickly approaching. So what is Aviva doing right now to be ready for when the CRA goes into place?
Okay. Uh, yeah, like I talked, right? I talked about 5 pillars. The first one
Hmm.
is compliance with the security requirements. So what we're doing is basically fine-tuning our software development practices to ensure we are conforming with the CRA requirements. And we're also putting in place a process to meet the conformity assessment. So that's what we're doing in terms of software development. In terms of risk assessment, right, we are assessing the security risk associated with the entire supply chain of software that is embedded with Aviva software. We want to make sure that all that software meets those requirements. In terms of providing free security updates, right? Aviva has already updated our product lifecycle policy in preparation for the CRA, and a lot of the expectations of that are already built into our product lifecycle policy. Um, Another question is in terms of active vulnerability incident. We're putting in place a mechanism to report that to European authorities. And finally, uh, technical documentation. So we're further improving our software documentation, and we're also putting in place any documentation improvements that are required by CRA, such software bill of materials and the conformity assessment technical specifications.
Hmm.
So there is a lot going on in Aviva, and these are just examples, right? There is a lot more that the business is undertaking to achieve and comply with all the demands that come from this regulation.
All right. Well, thanks
Awesome.
for the insights, Abe. I mean, I'm just looking at the time here, and we've gone past our traditional sense of 15 minutes to talk about some of these subjects here. And sorry to cut you off there, Mary Alice, but I mean, what I probably want to say, I mean, this is great. Unfortunately, what I would say with all this is sort of the end of our program, right? But I don't think the conversations are going to stop here, right? We're probably going to have a little bit more detailed conversations, if you reach out to us through our sort of social media programs like LinkedIn, Twitter, or any of our forums out there, please reach out to us. We'd like to hear more and explore a little bit more about these sort of topics. Abe, I think you're a constant poster on those typical forums, but please head on over, share your thoughts. We're happy to talk with you there. But don't forget us to follow us at Aviva or on LinkedIn or Twitter, I said again, and then just let us know about your technical needs there. But really appreciate your time on the call. This is a pretty interesting topic for all of us, so we'll see you in the next sort of episode there. Thank you.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you, Edward and Mary Alice. I really enjoyed participating in this podcast. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.
All right.